warm welcome. We are in conversation with one of India's most respected entrepreneurs, technocrats, now investor as well, Nandan Nilekani. Thank you so much for talking to ET Now. It's been a while since we had you on the channel, so I just want to get your opening thoughts on, where you see India today in terms of the broad economy. We've had a big elections just last week. What is your assessment of where we are as a country, as an economy?
Well, I'm actually very excited by the potential of what is possible today. I think many of the investments that India has made in creating the digital infrastructure over the last 7 or 8 years is now bearing fruit and is opening up huge opportunities for transformation, both in the government as well as in the private sector, and certainly in the innovation economy and startups. So I'm very excited by the broad range of possibilities today.
And the elections this last week has proved that India is evolving to a democracy, a very majoritarian setup. Some people draw parallels to what's happened with Singapore. Some people say that it's also causing worry because you don't have a vibrant opposition in the current circumstances. What do you make of it? Is this an opportunity for the Modi government to maybe push through some game-changing reforms, or are you worried about the negative effects? Just give us your sense of what you make of this big mandate that the government.
Sure. No, well, I think for me the takeaway from this is that people want things to get better. People want their lives to be improved. I think I've been saying this for many years. I wrote about it in my book 10 years back, that India has a huge aspiration gap. So 1 billion people are on the march. They're looking for a better opportunity for themselves. They want the children to be educated. They want them to get good jobs. And I think they're looking for anything or anyone who can solve some of those things for them. And I think that's really the message, which really, to me it's great that UP is now saying the same thing that the rest of India is saying, is that we want to get on with it. It's really a message saying, let's get on with it. So I think it's now up to all of us to fulfill the aspirations of the people.
Right. And is this also a signal on what's going to happen in 2019, you think? Or,
well,
is it too soon to say, and do you see a regroup happening to,
No, I'm no political expert. As Lenin said, for decades, nothing can happen, and in a few days, decades can happen. So things can change very quickly. So I won't venture a guess about that. All I can say is that it confirms my belief that if we can work to give Indians better solutions for their lives, they will adopt it very quickly.
Right. The narrative that we've seen in the last few weeks is also, on development, where the government is directly talking to the poor on the opportunities going forward. While one school of thought is, in agreement with this, there is also a risk that it could turn populist. Are there ways where the government can push through programs, push through game-changing reforms without the risk of, populism? How does it do this?
Oh, absolutely. I think, I think it's possible to do things which are good for the people and good for the economy. And I think the biggest mega trend to my mind is India is going to become more and more of a formal economy in the next 5 to 10 years. The reality of India is that there's a very small part of us who are in the formal economy, who have jobs, who have bank accounts, who have education and so on, who have and the bulk of people are actually outside this very narrow formal economy. Only 4% of Indians pay income tax. Only 7% of Indians have formal jobs. So most people are actually compulsorily self-employed, doing something to keep themselves together. Now, I think what we're seeing now, and it's a combination of a stick and a carrot, is that more and more people are going to join the formal economy. On the stick side, I think the fact that there's effort to clean up on black money and so on means that people will be forced to declare their incomes and pay their taxes, which is a very good thing because India's tax to GDP ratio is abysmal. On the other side, I think as you digitize, digitization will enable people to create their own digital footprints, and then they can use their digital footprints to get a better job, to get education, to get a loan. So once people realize that a digital footprint is monetizable by them for their future, you will see them all joining the formal economy in droves. making digital payments, using smartphones and so on. So I think the transition that's going to happen, because Indians will go from being data poor to data rich before they are economically rich, and will learn how to use their data to advance their lives. You're going to see a mega trend in the next 5 years.
So before I come to the Aadhaar-based innovations that we are seeing to, bring about these changes in terms of payments, in terms of inclusion, I also want to pick your brains on the non-Aadhaar-based innovations that the government can potentially do. I mean, if you look at the last decade, perhaps, Narega was a big idea that wasn't really linked to Aadhaar or technology in that respect. But do you see programs like that, anything that you think can happen to really bring about change in a big way?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I believe that technology or using an underlying technological spine is actually important for every reform. I mean, today, for example, even in Narega, all payments are being done through Aadhaar-linked bank accounts, and that has removed a lot of the waste and so on. So I think, for me, technology is the substrate. It's the foundation for everything. Having said that, I think the reforms that we need are reforms that will enable people to get education quickly, so that more and more people become literate. It's about improving healthcare so people are in good health and they can do their job at the best and at their fullest ability, and reducing friction to business so that more and more jobs are created around the country. It's important to realize that India cannot follow the Chinese model or the Japanese model. Yeah, it has to be services led. It has to be a domestic economy led. It has to be platform led. So domestic services and platforms will be the key to growth and job creation. And that is something where the government can create the enabling infrastructure for that.
Right. So far if you see demonetization, initially the end goal seemed to be black money, then it became digital payments. Beyond digital payments, what's the next end goal going to be?
Demonetization, whatever its other implications, definitely served as a huge fillip and driver to digital transactions. Digital transactions went from being a side activity to central to the government strategy. And thanks to that focus and political energy again on digital transactions, we saw a whole host of reforms in about 60 days. You saw the TRAI simplifying the USSD payment infrastructure. You saw the launch of BHIM. You saw the launch of a USSD API. You saw the RBI lowering the fees on merchant transactions, a whole host of reforms. And such reforms happen when there is that sense of urgency. So I think that was a good thing. Today we have a very unique infrastructure in India where everybody has access to digital transactions. Somebody with a smartphone can use a BHIM or any other UPI app and do payments. Somebody with a feature phone can use a USSD UPI app and make payments. And somebody with just an Aadhaar number, which is 350 million people who don't have phones but have an Aadhaar number, can open a bank account using electronic KYC and go to a merchant who has an Aadhaar Pay terminal, put his finger and make a payment.
And what is your own role going to be? Are you advising the government on this? Because you have been advising NPCI on the payments part, but in terms of leveraging Aadhaar and India Stack, in terms of really using the digital infrastructure on top of Aadhaar, how are you going to help the government communicate this more effectively going forward?
Well, my role is, one is I'm an honorary advisor to NPCI. So I worked with them for the last 2-3 years working on the whole UPI stack and so on. So that's one role I play. And I'm a member of Chandrababu CM, Chandrababu Naidu ji's committee on cashless, where I give my inputs on all this. So that's my two roles.
Right. Are you happy with the communications around Aadhaar from the government, sir? Because recently, at least, the issue around the midday scheme in terms of making Aadhaar compulsory for students enrolled in the midday scheme didn't go down too well with people who felt that, students are being deprived unnecessarily.
No,
how would you have handled
I think if you read the actual fine print, there's no such thing, because they're not saying Aadhaar should be there from day one. Nobody should be, they have said clearly that nobody should be denied food if they don't have an Aadhaar number. It's the responsibility of the system to make sure kids get their Aadhaar number. The fact of the matter is there is massive leakage in midday meals like in every other scheme. And I think if the government wants to make government delivery more efficient, I think we need to support that. So on the one hand, we criticize the government saying they're not improving the delivery. The Supreme Court says that not a grain of rice should be wasted and so on. So that's the on the rhetorical side. On the other hand, if you actually use the most modern technology to simplify and improve things, we need to support them. Maybe, I think the messaging may have got a little confusing, but I think that as long as it's done in a way that nobody is denied their rights, I think it's fine.
No, in fact, the entire messaging was basically owned by the anti-Aadhaar lobby, because, they began to say midday meal scheme applies to schools, it doesn't apply to students. So why should students really pay the price for it?
See, I think this so-called anti-Aadhaar lobby is really just a small bunch of liberal elites who are in some echo chamber. If you see the way it works, they write in the same publications. It's the same people writing in the same publication, and they refer to each other. You think there's something, it's nothing, the same old people. The reality is that 1 billion people are using Aadhaar. It's like demonetization. I mean, there's this whole hue and cry about demonetization and so on. The reality is the people voted and said, we approve of it, right? Similarly, to me, Aadhaar also, there's one which is the Ashok Malik, the commentator, has coined a term called Khan market consensus. So the Khan market consensus, these Johnnies who roam around from Khan market to India International Center to JNU and all that, they have a certain view. And
so you're saying it's like a left liberal view that's
totally
hijacked?
Absolutely. There is, and a lot of the accusations are just delusional, not based on fact. I mean, it's very clear that Aadhaar is a system which is not for surveillance. I mean, I can give you chapter and verse on the way it's designed, the way the law is, to very clearly show that it has no purpose of surveillance. They keep saying surveillance, surveillance. It's like, the Nazis had a propaganda chief, Joseph Goebbels. And Goebbels had a very good line. He said, when you tell a lie once, it's a lie. When you tell a lie 1,000 times, it becomes true. So it's like that. You keep lying. It's surveillance, it's surveillance, it's surveillance, hoping that somebody will believe it. So I think a lot of this is just fact.
But are you concerned that this continuous, negative spin on Aadhaar, negative coverage, and negative coverage could, pose a risk that, the government uses it for everything, but in terms of the end impact, it's actually not huge?
No,
or do you see it still having a big impact on
huge.
public?
We shouldn't get distracted by some noise. The reality is 1.1 billion people have an Aadhaar. That's non-trivial. This is the only billion user platform anywhere in the world outside the US. That's a huge achievement. The reality is that on a spend of about $1 billion, the government has saved $7 billion. That's non-trivial. The reality is that it's used, for example, in eKYC and Mr. Ambani's Jio. He himself has said
in fact, he credited you for
well, he himself has said, it's very kind of
growth.
him, but they were able to enroll 1 million people a day and have 100 million enrollments using Aadhaar because they could deliver a SIM card in 2 minutes instead of 2 weeks. Now, these are all very, very significant things, and the people want it. There's no doubt. I mean, that's what I'm saying. Sometimes the guys in their bubble are not connected to the reality.
But sir, considering Aadhaar is sort of becoming pervasive in every service, I mean every service today, and Aadhaar has become mandatory.
No, it is. I mean, it is as per the law. Please understand, the Aadhaar Act, which has been passed by Parliament, has a clear process on how Aadhaar can be used in a government program. So they're following the law.
Right. But do you think more needs to be done to at least reassure people on, counts of data privacy, on, the scope of Aadhaar?
No, see.
Has that messaging not been done effective?
No, I think, see, again, if there are a bunch of people who are in a self-referential echo chamber who are not willing to look at any evidence, then you just have to ignore that.
So going forward, you mentioned India stack and demonetization and the impact. Will 2017, you think, be the tipping point when all this comes together?
Oh, absolutely.
2016 was all about the UPI, and a lot of people started talking about it, started introducing services. Do you believe 2017 could be a tipping point?
Totally. I mean, if you go back, I don't know if you remember this, but sometime in 2015, I made a presentation.
The WhatsApp moment.
Yeah, and it's all playing out now, right? I mean, all the stuff that I talked about. This is the year when digital payments will become huge. This is the year that UPI will become huge. The budget speech itself, the FM, Mr. Jaitley spoke about 2,500 crore digital transactions happening through all these things. And even if you assume that 60% happen through UPI, that's 1,350 crore digital transactions. Okay, not sure it'll all happen, but there's going to be a huge surge of digital transactions, basically because UPI is very unlike anything else. The thing with the debit cards and credit cards and all that, apart from high transaction fees, is that every merchant has to have a POS machine, every consumer has to have a debit card, every consumer must have a PIN. You know, all these are expensive things. But the good thing about UPI is that your phone to my phone. So 600 million people with a phone, either a smartphone or a USSD phone, can transact with one click. Suddenly the whole thing becomes very simple, and suddenly it becomes very simple for merchants to get payments. So actually you're seeing a step function change in the adoption of digital payments.
Right. And one more contentious issue is, of course, the future of banks. I mean, we heard Aditya Puri talking, in fact, at NASSCOM recently about, you know, Paytm's business model, about how it's really not sustainable going forward. Now, is this a very defensive move by banks, you know, in the light of these new technologies? Or do you see a case where, you know, wallets basically do not have a viable business proposition because banks themselves are offering UPI offerings for customers? So how is this going to play out going forward? Is there space for everyone in this market?
Well, first of all, the market is going to expand dramatically. India's banking system is actually available only to a few. Only 3% of Indians get credit from the formal banking system. So the massive expansion that is there for everyone to take. And I think, you know, both Aditya Puri has done an amazing job with HDFC Bank, Vijay has done an amazing job with Paytm. Let me not take sides.
You don't want to get into...
Yeah, both are outstanding entrepreneurs. But I think this sector needs a very competitive environment, because we need to, ultimately, if you look at it from the point of view of the Indian resident, we have to make sure that every Indian resident has access to a bank account, has access to a loan, has access to a pension, access to life insurance, health insurance, access to a mutual fund. It's not there today. Very few, I mean, just a few million Indians invest in stock markets. It's a very shallow market. So how do we make it broad-based? And for the first time, we have the infrastructure, the digital technology, to reach every person in India and make him part of our formal economy. That's a mega trend.
And in terms of the scale and scope, do you also see it going up? Because now you have Microsoft talking about, plugging in Aadhaar in their offerings. You were in a conversation with Satya Nadella.
In fact, they announced it a couple of days later. They announced how they would use Aadhaar in the Skype for interviews, so that people don't. Because in India, half of the fake interview, fake, you know, all kinds of, all fake is the operative word, right? Not fake news, but everything else. So,
at least not here.
Not yet. But I think I had a very good chat with Satya, and he caught on to a very important point, which is that in the rest of the world, see, generation of data at high volumes is a given, right? Because the moment you use a smartphone, you generate data. The moment you have a sensor in your car, you generate data. So data generation has just gone through the roof. But the difference is, in the rest of the world, this data is being used by a few companies and a few governments to, either monetize it or to keep track of someone. India is the only country in the world where the data is being used by the individual for his benefit. This is a very, he called it inverting the data. We are flipping it around. Instead of corporations using my data, I will use my data. So this is huge. I wish these privacy walas understood this point. They colonized their minds with some Western thoughts. They have not understood that we actually create the most modern infrastructure for data to be used by individuals for their own benefit. So I can use my data to get a loan, I can use my data to get a job, I can use my data to get better health care. This is a whole new paradigm.
Okay. And coming to...
Don't say okay in that cynical way.
No. I'm not one of the privacy walas. I have an Aadhaar card myself. I've used it for many things. But coming to another part, sir, which is your avatar as an investor and a mentor. If you look at the last few days, it's almost been like a week from hell for startups. It started with the Shopclues founders in a fight among themselves, harassment charges at the viral fever, and last night you had Stazilla CEO arrested because he didn't pay one of his vendors. What exactly is happening? How should we read all these developments together?
No, I think while I think we have had a very, very vibrant startup sector, I think the last few months have exposed various frailties or the fragile nature of some issues. Clearly, a lot of them are people-related issues, like management teams and all that. The other are related to financial and business model issues, having enough capital and so on. So I think it's the responsibility of all of us in the ecosystem to see how our entrepreneurs and our companies, both from a value system and leadership point of view, become very robust, as well as build sustainable business models. I think that's where I think we can learn a lot from the earlier generation of companies. I think Infosys, Wipro, TCS, all these companies, they were very, very stable for decades. They grew. They morphed from small companies to large mega corporations. So there's a lot of learning in that. A lot of how you think about long-term planning, how you build sustainable business, how do you develop people, how do you create a team that works together. There's a lot of learnings in that. So I think those learnings, in some sense, have not percolated to the next level.
Why do you think that is? Because I mean, is there a sense of sort of moral bankruptcy? I mean, that's a very harsh word to use. Or I mean, you guys were also first generation entrepreneurs, so we can't really brush off everything saying, it's first generation entrepreneurship, startup ecosystem is not mature. Where are the fault lines? Is it because we are being given too much money, too much power, or are the investors, board members not doing their job? What is really lacking?
Well, it's a little bit of everything. I think definitely too much capital too early has in some situations led to undesirable consequences. And then, thinking long term, because you also understand that all these guys are in a very hyper competitive environment. So you can't say, okay, I'll have a 5-year plan and all that, because you have to worry about next week. So there's also that pressure of hyper competition. So I mean, there are these issues, but I think at the same time, I think there's a lot to learn. I mean, from the older companies.
Right. Also want to understand, sir, with respect to the episode of Stazilla CEO in particular being arrested, do you think it could affect the risk appetite of other entrepreneurs? Because the government has been going gung-ho over the Startup India, but at the first sign of default, not because he's cheated, but because of a failure, if someone is dragged to the police station, is this sending out a bad message to the entire community, to the ecosystem?
No, I think it's unfortunate that it's reached that stage. And I don't know the details, so I can't comment on that. But I think the startup environment is quite resilient. I think it will continue to grow, and continue to attract capital. I think you'll see now more longer-term business plans, people who look at sustainability, people who look at a leadership team.
Not just GMBs.
Yeah. So I think all that is part of the growing up phase.
And so I want to also get your thoughts on, Step. It's something that you started a while back, to bring about more change in the education space. Where do things stand now, and give us a sense of where things will, how it will progress over the next 6 months too.
Sure. Well, Step actually was an idea inspired by my wife Rohini, and she and Shankar and I are co-founders of Step. And I think it's looking very promising. I think we are getting a lot of interest. We have we started with working with NGOs like Akshara and Pratham. Now we're getting interest from state governments. We're getting interest from around the world. I think the notion that it's not about a solution, but creating an infrastructure in which many people can build many solutions. That point is now being well understood by everybody.
So a platform on top of which you can...
Yeah, because you can contextualize solutions, because there's no one solution for learning, right? I mean, it depends on so many factors. So trying to say I'll build a solution for everybody, one size does not fit all. But if you build an infrastructure where you unlock scarce resources and then give the tools for people to build solutions to their context, then you have created a scalable architecture, which is what we have done. So we are very excited. I think this year is also a big year for Step.
And any other startups or ventures you're looking at, sir, since you've been investing at regular?
Well, actually, I've slowed down.
You've slowed down.
I did invest in a dozen or so. But now I think the time has come for me to step back and help these guys grow.
Thank you so much for talking to us.
Thank you, Chandra. Thank you.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/etnow and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at etnowlive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/etnow.